Mexican cartel harass a poor plumber at a gas station, unaware he's a deadly ex-CIA field agent. In a dusty, forgotten town on the edge of the Sonoran Desert, a deadly game is about to begin. A ruthless Mexican cartel thinks they're dealing with just another poor plumber, an easy mark to intimidate and control. They couldn't be more wrong. Mateo Vargas isn't your average handyman. For years, he was a lethal CIA field agent, operating in the shadows on missions no one knew existed. Known for precision, patience, and deadly skill, he's a ghost who strikes without warning and never leaves loose ends. This isn't just another fight for survival. It's the story of how one man's tactical genius and a small team of allies took on one of the deadliest cartels in the hemisphere and changed the game forever. And before I forget, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Now let's jump in. The morning sun baked the cracked pavement of a quiet gas station on the outskirts of Sonora, Mexico. It was the kind of place people barely noticed, a last stop for truckers, a rusted relic on the way to nowhere. But for Mateo Vargas, this was routine. His old white pickup truck coughed as he pulled in, the logo on the door barely visible. Vargas Plumbing, no job too small. Mateo moved with the deliberate pace of a man in no hurry. To the casual observer, he was just another worn-out plumber trying to get through the day. Grease under his fingernails, a slight limp in his left leg, and a weathered face that spoke of hard years. No one suspected that beneath his plain work shirt, scars from a different life were carefully hidden. As he filled his tank, 3 SUVs roared into the lot, engines growling like beasts off their chains. The vehicles bore the insignia of the Los Almas cartel, a black serpent coiled around a dagger. Out stepped cartel soldiers, young, arrogant, and armed. The leader of the group was a man named Diego El Rayo Morales, known for his quick temper and quicker trigger finger. He scanned the station with predatory eyes until they landed on Mateo, who remained focused on the pump, as if oblivious to the new arrivals. "Hey, viejo," Diego sneered, approaching with his crew. "You're parked in our spot." Mateo glanced at the empty lot around them, his voice calm. "Plenty of spots around." Diego's smile was cold. "But we like that one." One of Diego's men shoved Mateo's shoulder. "Move your piece of junk, old man." Mateo's hand brushed his cap, tipping it slightly as he assessed the situation. 5 armed men. Aggressive but sloppy. Finger discipline non-existent. Egos inflated. Not professionals. "Sure," Mateo said, turning to cap the fuel tank. His movement was slow, measured, cooperative on the surface. But his eyes were cataloging escape routes, weapons, weaknesses. The tactical clock was already ticking. As he walked to the driver's side, Diego spat near his feet. "Smart move, viejo. Would have been a shame if we had to." In one fluid motion, Mateo spun, slamming the truck door against the man closest to him. His hand shot to the dashboard where, taped beneath the steering wheel, rested a compact tactical knife. He drove it into the thigh of the second man, severing the femoral artery with surgical precision. The third cartel soldier fumbled for his weapon, but Mateo had already disarmed the first man, flipping the pistol in his hand with a practiced spin. 2 quick shots, non-lethal, but disabling, one to the shoulder, one to the knee. Chaos erupted. Diego stumbled back, caught off guard by the rapid shift. "Who the hell are you?" he shouted, retreating toward his SUV. Mateo's voice was ice. "Just a plumber." The remaining soldiers scrambled, dragging their wounded as they retreated. Mateo didn't pursue. Instead, he calmly retrieved his wrench from the truck bed and set it on the passenger seat. As he drove away, he knew this wasn't over. Cartels didn't let embarrassment slide. Back in their vehicle, Diego seethed, blood trickling from his busted lip. Find out who he is. No plumber moves like that. The chessboard had been set. Mateo Vargas had spent the last 10 years burying his past. But some ghosts don't stay buried. And some skills never fade. Diego Morales sat in the back seat of the SUV, his jaw clenched, his ego still bleeding from the gas station humiliation. His crew was silent. nursing wounds and bruised pride. Diego's lieutenant, Javier, finally broke the silence. "Boss, he's just a plumber. Some old man." Diego's glare was sharp. "No plumber moves like that. No plumber disables 3 armed men in seconds without hesitation. No plumber aims like that." Javier swallowed. "I'll have our people check him out." Diego lit a cigarette, exhaling slowly. "Do it, and bring me everything." 2 hours later, in a dusty cartel safe house, Javier returned with a grim expression and a thin folder in hand. We pulled his registration from the truck. Mateo Vargas. Local plumber. No known criminal ties. Clean record. Too clean. Diego pressed. Javier hesitated. "There's more. I had one of our people dig deeper. The records before Mexico are missing. Deleted. Like someone wiped them." Diego's brows furrowed. "Who the hell erases government files for a plumber?" Javier flipped open the folder, revealing a single photograph, an old surveillance shot of Mateo in tactical gear, much younger, his face partially obscured by night vision goggles. Below it, a redacted document from a U.S. intelligence database. The title still visible: CIA Field Operative, Status, Terminated, Retired. Diego's stomach turned. CIA? What the hell was he doing here? Javier tapped the photo. His last known assignment was blacked out. But word is, he was part of something called Sombra Azul, a deniable operations unit. Off the books, deep field assets. Ghosts. Diego's hands trembled with rage. Why is a ghost fixing toilets in Sonora? Javier shrugged. Maybe he wanted out. Diego crushed his cigarette in his palm. Too bad he found his way back in. He turned to his men. "I want eyes on him. All the time. I want to know where he sleeps, where he eats, who he talks to. We humiliated ourselves at that gas station. I don't care if he's ex-CIA, ex-military, or ex-God. I'm going to burn his life to the ground." Meanwhile, Mateo sat in a modest kitchen, carefully disassembling the pistol he had taken from the cartel thug. His movements were slow, deliberate, a ritual. He wasn't surprised they were digging into him. He knew the pattern. First, they'd watch. Then, they'd probe. Then, they'd strike. He glanced at the weathered photo on his fridge, his late wife, his reason for walking away from that world. For a decade, he'd been just a man with a wrench. But violence doesn't let go easily, and the cartel had made their first mistake. They'd made it personal. Mateo opened a hidden compartment beneath the kitchen floorboards. Inside were carefully wrapped packages, firearms, burner phones, encrypted radios. The tools of a life he had locked away. He sighed, picked up a worn tactical vest, and muttered to himself, "Let's see if I still remember how to do this." The quiet plumber was gone. The operative had returned. The Los Alamos cartel moved quickly. Within hours, their network of lookouts, halcones, spread across the dusty streets of Mateo's neighborhood. They perched in battered cars, leaned against lampposts, pretending to fix motorcycles or sell newspapers. But their eyes never stopped tracking one man, the plumber. Mateo noticed them immediately. He saw the mismatched shoes, the nervous glances, the telltale bulge under loose shirts. He'd seen these patterns in countries where getting noticed meant getting killed. But Mateo didn't panic. He didn't accelerate his steps or abandon his routine. He played the long game. At his plumbing jobs, he let them follow him to houses. He knew they were watching when he lingered at hardware stores, pretending to compare pipe fittings he didn't need. All the while, his sharp eyes mapped their rotation, their communication rhythms, their weak points. On his 3rd day under surveillance, he left his truck at a local diner, a deliberate choice, and entered through the front, leaving through the kitchen's back door. He slipped into a parallel alleyway, bypassing the man assigned to shadow him. Minutes later, Mateo was crouched behind a stack of pallets, watching one of the younger cartel watchers struggle to light a cigarette. With precise timing, Mateo approached from behind, wrapped his arm around the young man's neck, and whispered coldly into his ear, "You're new at this." The young cartel scout froze. Mateo tightened his grip just enough to make the message clear. "Tell Diego Morales this isn't a game he can win." With a firm push, Mateo released him, letting the boy stumble away, breathless and terrified. By the time the message reached Diego, Frustration was boiling over. Do you think this old man is playing hide-and-seek with us? Diego spat, pacing in his office. He's baiting us. Javier spoke carefully. We can overwhelm him. He's just one man. Diego slammed his fist on the desk. That's what I thought at the gas station. I won't make that mistake again. He barked orders. Escalate. Harass his contacts. Pressure his clients. Hurt the people around him. We'll squeeze him until he's forced to make a mistake. The next morning, Mateo's regular supply contact, a hardware store owner named Luis, found his windows shattered, his inventory trashed. The cartel didn't leave a note, but the message was clear. Mateo stepped into the wrecked store as Luis swept broken glass. You can't fight them, Mateo, Luis said, his voice low with fear. They'll kill everyone. Mateo calmly picked up a pipe fitting from the floor. I won't let it get that far. Luis gripped his arm. You can't do this alone. A faint smile crept across Mateo's face, the first in days. Who said I was alone? That night, Mateo sat in his workshop, dusting off an old satellite phone. He scrolled through memorized frequencies until he found the one he used to call ghosts. He keyed the mic, his voice steady. This is Vargas. Sombra Azul. I need a favor. The static hummed, then a clipped reply. We thought you were dead. Not yet. Send coordinates. We'll be there. Mateo leaned back, eyes sharp. The cartel thought they were hunting a lone plumber. They had no idea he was rebuilding a team. The sun dipped below the Sonoran hills, casting long shadows over the town as Mateo Vargas prepared for the storm to come. He moved through his small workshop with surgical precision, assembling and inspecting gear long hidden in storage. Maps of the surrounding streets were pinned to the wall. He marked cartel choke points, vehicle routes, and their preferred safe houses. His tactical mind clicked back into place like a well-oiled machine. Then, a familiar rumble echoed outside. A dust-covered motorcycle screeched to a stop. A tall woman with sun-creased skin and braided black hair pulled off her helmet. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, and filled with something Mateo hadn't seen in a long time, loyalty. Didn't think you'd ever light up that line again, she said. Didn't think I'd need to, Mateo replied, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Her name was Camila Ortega, codename Spectre. Former infiltration specialist. Former Sombra Azul. She set her pack down on the table, immediately syncing to Mateo's map. They've already made their first mistake. Which one? Mateo asked. They let me get this close. Over the next hour, more ghosts arrived. A lean, wiry man with shrapnel scars named Torres, explosives, and mechanical traps. An old sniper, Garza, moving stiffly but still carrying the same battered rifle that had saved Mateo's life years ago. Two more joined, each with scars, each with debts to settle. They weren't a polished team anymore. Time had worn their edges, but their minds were sharp and their instincts were intact. Mateo briefed them as if no years had passed. Los Almas is pushing hard. They've escalated to indirect pressure. We need to stop that before they move on civilians. He pointed to a known cartel safe house on the outskirts. We'll hit this first. It's a small arms cache. They think it's a ghost house, empty most nights. They leave it unguarded after midnight. If we deny them their resources, they'll be forced to expose themselves. Camila nodded. Standard snatch and burn? Not this time, Mateo said, shaking his head. I want them to know it's us. I want them to feel it. We're going to dismantle them piece by piece, and we're going to do it loudly. Torres grinned. Finally, I was getting tired of plumbing fittings. That night, they moved as they used to, silent, fluid, coordinated. Mateo led from the front, his every step deliberate. They breached the safe house with precision, quickly neutralizing the two guards inside. Mateo left their bodies alive but bound, a calling card pinned to one man's chest, Sombra Azul. They stripped the house of weapons, explosives, and cash, then torched it in controlled stages, using shaped charges to ensure the fire sent a message visible across the hills. From a nearby rooftop, Mateo watched the flames rise. He keyed the radio to an open cartel frequency. Diego Morales, he said calmly. You wanted to know who I am. I'm the ghost you woke up. I'm the problem you can't kill. The silence on the other end lasted just long enough. Then came Diego's furious voice. "I'll bury you." Mateo's tone didn't waver. "Get in line." The first shot had been fired, and now the game was fully in motion. Mateo turned to Camila. "They'll come harder now." Camila's smile was sharp. "Let's make them regret that." The cartel wasted no time. By sunrise, Diego Morales had mobilized his network, dispatching heavily armed convoys to sweep Mateo's known routes. Checkpoints sprang up like weeds, cartel enforcers harassing locals, leaning hard on anyone who had so much as shaken Mateo's hand. His message to the town was clear: help the plumber, and you'll pay the price. But Mateo had spent years quietly fixing more than just pipes. He had built relationships, trust, and goodwill in this community. And now, those investments were paying off. Luis, the hardware store owner, passed him quiet updates through coded receipts. Maria, the elderly grocer, slipped burner SIM cards into his change. Even the teenagers on street corners, kids Mateo had once helped get their bikes running, fed him the cartel's convoy routes in exchange for nothing but a silent nod. Still, Mateo knew the real test was coming. By the third day, Diego had located a soft target: Mateo's old friend and occasional employer, Armando, a mechanic whose garage Mateo often worked from. Cartel trucks boxed in the garage just after sunset. Inside, Armando grabbed his phone and quickly dialed the emergency code Mateo had given him. 3 rings, hang up, repeat. No words. No panic. Just a signal. Mateo, Camila, and Torres were already en route. They arrived just as Diego's men were dragging Armando out of the garage, their weapons drawn, posturing for a street execution. From the shadows, Garza's suppressed rifle whispered twice. 2 cartel soldiers dropped before they realized they were under fire. Panic spread. The remaining soldiers scrambled for cover. Mateo moved swiftly, flanking the scattered formation. His steps were silent, his movements fluid. He snapped the tactical baton into place and engaged the closest man, disabling him with a precise strike to the elbow, disarming him mid-motion. Across the street, Torres detonated a remote charge beneath the cartel's lead pickup, flipping it onto its side, sending debris raining onto the pavement. Camila swept in from the blind side, pinning down the last 2 men with rapid bursts from her compact SMG. Mateo approached the shaken cartel lieutenant, the same one who had cornered Armando. "You think you understand how this works?" Mateo's voice was low, controlled. "You don't. I've been fighting men like you long before you held your first gun." The lieutenant stammered, trying to reach for his radio. Mateo kicked it away, stepping closer. "Tell Diego Morales, this isn't a negotiation. He steps into this town again, he burns." The lieutenant nodded frantically before scrambling to his feet and fleeing. Mateo turned to Armando, helping him up. "You all right?" Armando smirked, brushing dust off his shirt. "I'm fine, but my garage isn't." "I'll fix it," Mateo said without missing a beat. Armando chuckled despite the tension. "Plumber's promise?" "Plumber's promise." They retreated quickly, vanishing before Diego's reinforcements arrived. By the time Diego heard the details, his frustration boiled into fury. "They're hitting us like clockwork," Diego growled. "They're using tactics, timed assaults, staged demolitions, coordinated flanks. This isn't a plumber. This is a warfighter." Javier nodded, grim-faced. "We underestimated him." Diego slammed his fist on the table. "Then it's time we bring everything." His eyes burned with rage. "Tell the butcher to cross the border. We need someone who knows how to kill ghosts." The next move was Diego's, and he was about to make it a brutal one. The air inside a dimly lit, fortified compound near the Arizona border was thick with tension. Diego Morales paced back and forth, phone pressed tightly against his ear. Across the line, a gruff voice growled back, cold, efficient, lethal. The butcher wasn't his real name. It was a whispered legend among cartel circles, a ghost who carved his way through battlefields with surgical brutality. Former military contractor turned mercenary, his reputation was built on bodies left behind, and Diego needed that kind of recklessness. "Get him here," Diego commanded. "He's going to put that ghost plumber down for good." Hours later, A blacked-out SUV slid silently through the desert night, carrying a man wrapped in shadows and danger. The butcher had arrived. Mateo was unaware of the new threat creeping closer, but his instincts were razor-sharp. Camila gathered the team. "We've got a new variable. Heard whispers on the network. An outside killer coming in. Someone who doesn't play by rules." Torres loaded explosives quietly. "If he's called the Butcher, he probably doesn't." Mateo nodded grimly. "Then we have to be ready. He's not just after me. He's after anyone who stands with us." The team worked quickly to set traps, build layers of defense, and tighten their communication. Mateo's tactical mind came alive again. They laid false trails to confuse trackers and planted decoys. Each movement calculated to draw the enemy in and fracture their strength. The Butcher, meanwhile, started his own hunt, an aggressive, merciless campaign of terror. Cartel scouts reported entire safe houses burned to the ground, bodies left with grotesque warnings carved into their skin. Mateo knew that was the Butcher's signature, psychological warfare, designed to shatter morale. But instead of cracking, Mateo's allies grew tighter, sharper. Each close call steeled their resolve. One night, during a moonless patrol, Camila whispered into the radio, "Targets spotted near the East Ridge. Heavy foot traffic. Possible Butcher advance team." Mateo's breath tightened. "Hold positions. Wait for my signal." Minutes later, a group of shadowy figures slipped through the rocky terrain. The team struck with deadly precision, silencing two, capturing one alive for intel. The Butcher's men were ruthless, but Mateo's team was disciplined. As the captive was questioned under harsh light, he snarled, "The Butcher's coming for you. You're a dead man walking." Mateo's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." The chessboard was no longer just between Cartel and ex-agent. Now, a merciless killer had entered the game. The sun had set behind the jagged peaks of the Sonoran Desert, casting deep shadows over El Mirador, an abandoned adobe structure perched on a hillside overlooking a narrow mountain pass. Mateo Vargas and his team had transformed this forgotten ruin into a tactical stronghold. Maps, surveillance feeds, and makeshift comms gear cluttered the dusty interior. Outside, the desert night was alive with sounds. The distant howl of coyotes, the whisper of the wind, and the quiet footsteps of an approaching enemy. Mateo crouched near a cracked window, eyes fixed on the darkened pass below. "The Butcher's coming," he said, voice low but steady. "His men will move fast and ruthless. We have to make every second count." Camila Ortega tightened the strap on her SMG, her expression hardening. "I've laid low all night for this moment. They won't get past us." Torres, the explosives expert, knelt over a network of improvised tripwires and pressure plates set among the rocky outcroppings. "These will slow them down and make sure they know the price of stepping into our territory." Mateo gathered his team in a tight huddle, his tone calm but commanding. "The Butcher thrives in direct fights, but that's his weakness. We won't give him that. We'll channel his forces into a kill zone. Garza, you're our eyes. Take the ridge and cover us with your rifle. Torres, keep those traps ready. Camila and I will lead the ambush." Garza, the sniper with the cold gaze of a predator, adjusted his scope. "Targets incoming. East Ridge, just past the ravine." Night deepened. The first figures slipped through the pass, mercenaries moving like shadows, their gear glinting faintly under the moonlight. Suddenly, the desert exploded. Torres detonated his charges. A series of carefully timed blasts shattered the silence, sending rocks tumbling and igniting small fires. Shouts and curses rose from the ambushed mercenaries as they scrambled to regain order. Camila's SMG roared, firing controlled bursts that pinned the disoriented cartel men behind shattered boulders and broken cacti. Mateo slipped through the chaos, his movements fluid and deadly. He dispatched two guards with a quick snap of his tactical baton, his strikes precise and merciless. Close quarters was his domain. The Butcher's men fought back with brutal efficiency, but they were funneled into the kill zone, their numbers quickly thinning. Then, cutting through the chaos, emerged the Butcher himself, tall and broad, his face obscured beneath a tactical helmet, movements practiced and cold. He advanced with the deadly confidence of a man who had carved his reputation with blood and steel. Matteo locked eyes with the imposing figure across the starlit battlefield. Time slowed. Every breath, every muscle twitch became amplified. The butcher lunged, initiating a brutal dance of knives and gunfire. Matteo dodged the first slash, countering with a sweep of his baton. The clash echoed sharply, metal ringing against metal. Garza's sniper rifle cracked, piercing the night with deadly accuracy. The butcher stumbled, a bullet lodged in his thigh, but his rage only intensified. He charged harder, relentless. Matteo twisted, using the momentum to slam the butcher against a jagged rock face. Breathing heavy, eyes burning with resolve, Matteo whispered, "This ends tonight." The butcher snarled, pain twisting his features, but even wounded, he was a formidable opponent. The fight was far from over. But for the first time, the butcher knew he was no longer hunting a plumber. He was facing a ghost. The rocky outcrop where Matteo and the butcher had clashed was quiet now, save for the heavy breathing of Matteo and the muffled groans of the wounded scattered across the rocky terrain. Moonlight cast long shadows over the battlefield, the remnants of the firefight glinting coldly on spent shell casings and shattered equipment. Matteo leaned against a boulder, taking deep, controlled breaths as adrenaline began to ebb. His tactical mind immediately shifted into assessment mode. What went right, what went wrong, and what came next? This wasn't over. Far from it. From his vantage point, Matteo scanned the horizon. Garza, the sniper, was a faint silhouette perched high on a ridge, his rifle trained on the retreating enemy. Garza's presence was a comfort, a silent guardian watching their backs. Camila and Torres moved quickly, securing their perimeter and tending to minor injuries. Camila's face was tight with focus, but her eyes flickered with fierce determination. "We held them off," she said quietly, wiping sweat and dust from her brow. "But the butcher is wounded and dangerous. He won't quit." Matteo nodded. "He'll fall back, regroup, and come back with everything. We've just scratched the surface of his fury." Torres, crouched near a makeshift satchel charge, loaded another explosive with practiced efficiency. "If he thinks he can overwhelm us with numbers, we'll make sure every supply line and access point burns first." Before they could finalize plans, a crackling radio burst to life nearby. The cartel captive they'd taken in an earlier raid, the man tied to a post not far off, growled through the static, eyes blazing. 2 platoons. Reinforcements coming fast. More guns, more blood. Matteo's jaw tightened as he processed the grim news. "We don't have the luxury of waiting." Gathering the team, Matteo outlined a swift strategy. "Camila and Torres, you'll hit their supply routes. Roads, fuel depots, ammo caches, anything that slows their advance without risking capture. Garza," Matteo continued, "you provide overwatch. Keep eyes on enemy movements and cover retreats. I'll lead a small squad to intercept their reinforcements before they reach us. We disrupt their strength before they can concentrate it." They moved like shadows, ghosts in the desert night, silent, coordinated, and ruthless. Explosions rocked distant outposts as Torres set charges, and Camila's team sabotaged supply trucks under cover of darkness. Garza's sniper rounds echoed sporadically, finding targets before they could sound alarms. The cartel's advance faltered. Communications scrambled. Morale cracked. Back at El Mirador, the team regrouped under starlight, bruised but unbroken. Matteo's voice carried a weight beyond the battle. "This fight isn't just survival. It's for the townspeople, the innocents living in fear. We're sending a message." Camila smirked, her voice dry with humor. "That a plumber can still break more than just pipes." Torres laughed quietly. "Yeah, hell of a plumber." Matteo's eyes hardened with resolve. "They thought we were weak. They thought they could crush us. We proved them wrong." He glanced around at the faces of his team, scarred, determined, ready. This war isn't over. But now, the ghosts are awake. The morning after their successful sabotage, the atmosphere around El Mirador was tense but expectant. Matteo's team knew that victory on one front would only provoke a harsher retaliation. And they were right. At a sprawling cartel compound a few miles south, Diego Morales paced aggressively. His eyes burned with fury as he listened to reports from his lieutenants. The losses had hit hard, supply lines disrupted, men captured or killed, and the ever-elusive Mateo Vargas still at large. Enough, Diego snapped. It's time to send a message. I want their safe houses burned to ash. I want their allies scared into silence. And most of all, I want Vargas. Javier nodded grimly. We've assembled a strike force. The butcher will lead it. He's healed and ready. Diego's lips twisted into a cruel smile. Good. Let's end this dance. Meanwhile, Mateo and his team fortified their positions. They moved cautiously, aware the cartel's response would be swift and brutal. Camila checked their gear, loading fresh magazines and inspecting explosives. They'll come hard. We need to be ready for a siege. Garza, atop the ridge with his sniper rifle, scanned the horizon. They're gathering troops. At least 50 strong, heavily armed. Mateo's eyes narrowed. Then we make every shot count. That night, as shadows lengthened, the cartel struck. Flaming tracers arced through the air, lighting up the desert like deadly fireworks. Explosions shook the adobe walls of El Mirador as cartel forces assaulted with heavy weapons and relentless aggression. Mateo's team responded with fierce precision, grenades tossed with surgical timing, sniper rounds picking off advancing foes, and hand-to-hand combat when lines were breached. Despite being outnumbered, the team fought with disciplined coordination, adapting their traps and using the terrain to their advantage. Through the cacophony of battle, Mateo's voice rang out over the radio. Hold positions. Watch your sectors. Don't give them an inch. Hours dragged on, the desert illuminated by fire and gunfire. Finally, as dawn broke, the cartel forces withdrew, bloodied and beaten. Mateo looked across the battlefield, scars and exhaustion marking his face. They came to break us. Camila's voice was steady, but they only made us stronger. Garza exhaled slowly, eyes still sharp. This war's far from over. Mateo nodded. No, but they'll think twice before crossing us again. As the sun rose, casting light over the battered landscape, the team prepared for whatever came next. Because this was more than survival. It was a war for the soul of their town. The morning after the cartel's failed assault, the town lay under a heavy blanket of silence, one born not of peace, but of fear. Windows shuttered early, streets emptied by sundown, and hushed voices whispered prayers behind locked doors. The scars the cartel inflicted went beyond blood and fire. They carved deep into the fabric of the community's spirit. Mateo Vargas knew this all too well. The fight wasn't only on the rocky ridges or in shadowed ambushes. It was here, in the heart of the town, in the eyes of every mother, every shopkeeper, every child trying to sleep while the distant echoes of violence haunted the night. He called a meeting in the back room of Rosa's bakery, a small, warm space cluttered with bread racks and flour dust. Around the battered table sat a handful of the town's leaders, shopkeepers, farmers, mechanics, even the schoolteacher. Their faces were etched with worry, but also hope, because Mateo was here. I'm not just fighting for myself anymore, Mateo said, voice steady but charged with urgency. I'm fighting for all of you. This town, these people, they're worth protecting. But we can't do it alone. We have to stand together. Rosa, wiping flour from her hands, nodded. We'll do whatever it takes. But we need a plan, a way to protect ourselves without waiting for someone else to save us. Mateo unfolded his vision. Community watch groups, early warning networks built on radios and burner phones, safe houses scattered across town where families could shelter if the cartel came knocking. He emphasized coordinated responses, emphasizing that every member of the community could be a part of the defense. Camila and Torres took charge of training, teaching volunteers how to use basic defensive tactics, how to identify cartel signs, how to communicate silently and securely. Garza helped set up hidden surveillance points. Using his snipers, to spot potential threats before they became problems. They weren't soldiers, but they were becoming a force. But the cartel was ruthless and unrelenting. One night, A supply run organized by Mateo's team to bring essentials to safe houses was ambushed on a dirt road just outside town. The firefight was fierce but brief. Despite their efforts, they lost Luis, the hardware store owner who had been their eyes and ears, the man who quietly fed them intel and supplies for months. The loss hit Mateo like a gut punch. At Luis's funeral, under the harsh sun and in the presence of the grieving town, Mateo stood tall, but his voice cracked with emotion. They wanted to silence us, to make us give up. But Luis showed us what it means to fight. We carry his courage with us. The community, once fearful and fragmented, hardened in resolve. The whispers of dread turned to murmurs of defiance. Mateo's fight had become theirs. This war was no longer just tactical, it was personal. And Mateo Vargas would lead that fight, no matter the cost. In the days following Luis's funeral, the atmosphere in town shifted palpably. The crushing weight of fear began to lift, replaced by a flicker of something far more powerful: determination. Mateo Vargas and his team were no longer just isolated fighters in the shadows. They had become the nucleus of a growing resistance. Word spread quickly. The small groups that had once kept their heads down now stepped forward to join the fight. Farmers who had once been too afraid to tend their fields at night now patrolled the outskirts. Shopkeepers learned to recognize cartel scouts and report suspicious movements. Even the younger generation, many of whom had grown up under the cartel's thumb, were eager to learn. Camila and Torres trained them relentlessly, teaching marksmanship, tactics for silent communication, and how to set simple traps. Garza expanded his surveillance operations, turning scavenged binoculars and radios into an informal but effective early warning network. Tripwires and makeshift alarms dotted the town's perimeter. If they try to sneak in, we'll know before they even cross the line, he said, eyes sharp as he scanned the desert horizon. Behind the scenes, Mateo reached out to old contacts from his Sombra Azul days, ghosts from his past who could provide critical intelligence, occasional weapons shipments, and tactical advice. These contacts operated in the shadows, their identities hidden, their assistance invaluable. Mateo knew that any misstep could blow their cover and bring devastating reprisals, but isolation was a risk he couldn't afford. Meanwhile, Diego Morales's fury boiled over. His patrols became more violent, less restrained. Villagers who dared show any support for Mateo's network faced brutal reprisals. Homes were torched, livestock slaughtered, and people disappeared in the night, swallowed by the desert's silence. It was a savage message meant to break the community's will. But the people had already learned another lesson, the lesson of resistance. When a group of cartel thugs raided a farm on the town's outskirts, they were met not with helplessness but with fierce gunfire. Men and women armed with Mateo's training fought back in the darkness, using the cover of the land they knew so well. The firefight was chaotic and brutal, but the cartel's dominance, once absolute, was shaken. Back at El Mirador, Mateo convened with his team. They're probing our defenses, testing our resolve. Every fight we win weakens their grip. Camila nodded. We've bought time, and time is on our side. Torres grimaced, loading another charge. But they won't stop. They'll push harder, faster. Mateo's gaze hardened with resolve. Then we make sure it's not us who breaks. A new war was emerging in the Sonoran desert. Not just a battle for survival, but for freedom itself. Mateo and his team knew the cartel wouldn't stay idle after their recent defeats. Diego Morales was desperate, and desperation made enemies reckless. It was only a matter of time before they struck back, and Mateo intended to make sure it would be on his terms. At El Mirador, the team gathered around a faded map spread across a rough wooden table, illuminated by a flickering lantern. Garza, ever vigilant, pointed to a narrow canyon road snaking through the rugged terrain. This convoy moves through here every 3 days. It's their main supply line: ammo, weapons, even cash. Mateo's eyes narrowed. If we take this out, we cut off their lifeline. It'll slow their operations, maybe cripple them. He outlined the plan carefully. We hit fast, hard, and clean. No civilians caught in the crossfire. Camila, you cover the north flank. Torres, explosives are yours. Garza, overwatch with the sniper rifle. I'll lead the assault team. The team packed gear quietly and moved out under the cover of darkness. The desert night was cold and silent except for their footsteps crunching over gravel and loose rock. They navigated the rugged terrain, each step calculated to avoid detection. At the chosen choke point, a narrow bend where the canyon walls closed in like a vice, Torres set a series of improvised explosive devices. Each was wired to tripwires stretched across the path, designed to detonate the moment the lead vehicle crossed. Mateo crouched low behind a boulder, whispering into his radio, "Positions. Hold steady. Wait for my signal." Minutes stretched into an eternity as headlights flickered in the distance, creeping closer through the winding pass. The convoy, a series of armored trucks and SUVs, rumbled forward, unaware of the deadly trap waiting. At the precise moment, Mateo's voice cut through the radio, calm and commanding. "Now." Torres triggered the charges. A thunderous explosion shattered the silence. The lead truck flipped violently, blocking the road with a fiery wreck. The blast sent a shockwave that rattled the canyon walls and threw dust and debris high into the air. Confusion erupted among the convoy. Men scrambled from vehicles, weapons raised but disoriented. It was chaos. Mateo's team struck with surgical precision. Camila's SMG barked bursts into the shadows, pinning down enemy fighters behind rocks and overturned vehicles. Mateo moved like a ghost, silently disabling a machine gun nest with a flashbang and swift, brutal close-quarters moves. Torres planted additional charges, ensuring no reinforcements could advance quickly. Garza's rifle cracked intermittently, dropping cartel soldiers before they could regroup. Despite their skill and ruthless training, the cartel fighters were funneled into a kill zone with no room to maneuver. Mateo's team dominated the terrain and the engagement. Within minutes, the convoy was neutralized. Weapons and supplies were destroyed or captured. The cartel's lifeline was severed. Mateo's radio buzzed. He keyed the mic. "Convoy stopped. Supplies denied. Repeat, convoy stopped. They're going to feel this." But beyond the tactical victory, the operation was a message, a declaration of war. Diego Morales would understand clearly now that the man he called the Plumber was no ordinary threat. Mateo Vargas and his team were hunters, and they were closing in. The destruction of the supply convoy was a blow Diego Morales had not anticipated. His operations were beginning to falter, the flow of weapons, ammunition, and cash drying up like a river in the desert heat. Morale among his men dipped, whispers of the phantom Plumber, who outmaneuvered them, spreading fear and doubt like wildfire. Inside his heavily fortified compound, Diego sat at the head of a long table surrounded by his lieutenants. The room was thick with cigar smoke and the palpable tension of a man losing control. His eyes burned with fury as he addressed his council. "That damn Plumber and his crew. They've cut off our supplies, hit us where it hurts most. We can't keep fighting ghosts in the dark forever." Javier, Diego's cold and calculating second-in-command, leaned forward. "We have to change tactics. Enough with these hit-and-run skirmishes. We need a decisive strike. Hit them at their base. Take out El Mirador, their team, and their network in one surgical operation." Diego's lips curled into a cruel smile, the kind that promised bloodshed. "Good, but I want no loose ends. No survivors to tell our enemies how we came for them." Back at El Mirador, Mateo's team had sensed the shifting winds. The cartel's patrols had grown bolder, more aggressive. Ambushes were launched with more frequency and precision. It was clear the cartel was desperate and dangerous. Mateo called an urgent meeting in their command post. "They're escalating. It's not just intimidation anymore. They want us wiped out." Camila's eyes flashed with determination. "They're going to throw everything they have at us. If they want a siege, we'll give them a war." Torres, already methodical in his preparations, nodded grimly. "We're going to need reinforcements. Old allies, people who know how to hit back hard." Garza, scanning reports from surveillance, added, "We can't just sit back and wait. We have to disrupt their plans before they can bring their full force here." Mateo's mind raced. The past few weeks had been a test, but this was the real turning point. The cartel was committing its top resources for a decisive blow. He looked each member of his team in the eyes, his voice steady and resolute. This is war. We are the resistance. We fight for every life in this town. We're going to win. The team nodded, their resolve hardening like steel. Outside, the desert wind whispered a warning. A storm was coming. The fate of El Mirador and the town it defended would be decided in the battles ahead. Dawn's first light spilled over the Sonoran desert, casting long shadows across El Mirador. The team had transformed the crumbling adobe ruins into a fortress, a labyrinth of barricades fashioned from stone, scrap metal, and salvaged wood. Explosive traps lay hidden beneath loose gravel and thorny brush, ready to unleash chaos. Every possible ingress had been fortified, every angle covered by sharp-eyed sentinels. Mateo stood atop the highest ridge, scanning the valley below through his tactical visor. His jaw was set, eyes focused. The distant rumble of engines grew louder, the unmistakable sound of armored vehicles and trucks bearing the cartel's strike force. A thunderous storm of steel and fury was advancing toward their stronghold. Camila moved silently, methodically loading magazine after magazine into her SMG. Her hands never wavered, her breath controlled. "They're coming," she said, her voice steady but taut with tension. Torres adjusted the final detonators on an explosive charge concealed beneath a rocky outcrop overlooking the most likely approach routes. "They won't get through without paying dearly," he muttered, his fingers steady despite the stakes. Garza settled into his sniper nest with practiced ease, his scope trained on the converging convoy. "I'll keep their heads down as long as I can," he promised, voice low and confident. As the cartel forces crested the ridge and poured into the canyon, chaos erupted. Torres triggered the first charge. Rockslides thundered down the slopes, crushing vehicles and blocking key pathways. Explosions detonated in a carefully choreographed sequence, turning the narrow approaches into a deadly maze. Gunfire erupted, the sharp staccato of automatic weapons mingling with the deep booms of grenades and the eerie whistle of incoming rounds. Camila's SMG barked with precision, her shots forcing enemies to take cover behind shattered boulders and twisted metal. The Butcher led the cartel assault, his presence a grim specter amid the carnage. His men fought with brutal efficiency, pressing forward despite mounting casualties. Their training was ruthless, their resolve hardened by years of violence. Mateo moved through the shadows with lethal grace, his tactical mind several steps ahead of the enemies. He coordinated with Camila, Garza, and Torres via radio, calling out enemy positions, directing crossfire, and setting traps in real time. Every move was calculated, every shot deliberate. The cartel's numerical superiority was undeniable, but the defenders' discipline, preparation, and knowledge of the terrain turned the tide. One by one, the attackers were whittled down, trapped in kill zones, cut off from support, overwhelmed by coordinated strikes. Hours passed under the blistering sun. Sweat and dust coated every surface, the scent of gunpowder thick in the air. The cartel's assault faltered, their ranks shattered and bloodied. Finally, the attackers began to retreat, dragging their wounded and dead back through the desert. Mateo's voice came over the radio, calm but firm. "Hold your ground. They're falling back, but this war is far from over." The siege had been repelled, but the battle for El Mirador, and the soul of the town, was only just beginning. The brutal siege had finally ended, but its aftermath left El Mirador battered and exhausted. Dust still hung thick in the air, settling slowly over shattered stone walls and scorched earth. Mateo Vargas moved deliberately through the camp, his senses sharp despite the exhaustion clawing at his body. The victory was theirs, but the cost had been steep. Wounded men lay on makeshift stretchers, their faces grim but relieved. Supplies were depleted, and the defenses, though intact, bore scars from the brutal assault. Mateo's eyes scanned the horizon beyond the perimeter. He knew better than anyone that the cartel wouldn't simply lick its wounds and vanish. Diego Morales was a cunning adversary, and his fury was just beginning to boil over. "We've bought ourselves time," Mateo said quietly to Camila as she administered first aid to Torres, whose arm was bandaged but still bleeding. "But it's only a matter of time before Morales shifts gears. They'll come back, harder, smarter." Camila glanced up, her gaze fierce and steady. "We're not just fighting bullets and bombs. We're fighting the clock, and their will to crush us." Nearby, Garza sat cross-legged, poring over intercepted radio chatter on a small handheld device. The low static-filled voices crackled with urgency and desperation. His brow furrowed. Morales is furious. He's mobilizing reinforcements, calling in heavier weapons, more men. They're trying to overwhelm us with sheer force. Torres winced as Camila cleaned a wound on his forearm, but managed a grim smile. "Then we need heavier weapons, too. And better intel. We can't just react anymore. We need to dictate the battlefield." Mateo gathered the team in the cramped command post, a tent illuminated by flickering lanterns, maps pinned to the walls, radios emitting low hums, and laptop screens glowing softly. The atmosphere was tense but focused. "We can't just hold and defend," Mateo said, voice steady but charged with determination. "We need to hit back hard. Find their arms caches, their safe houses. Cut off their supply routes. We disrupt their operations piece by piece until they're too weak to fight." Garza nodded, pointing at the map. "I tracked movements to a facility near the old mining town, a strategic hub for their logistics. If we hit that hard, we cripple their ability to resupply and regroup." Camila reloaded her rifle with a quiet click, eyes never leaving the map. "Then that's our next target." Plans were drawn quickly, each detail scrutinized, routes in and out, timing, contingencies. Every member of the team understood the stakes. This wasn't just another raid. It was a calculated strike aimed at dismantling the cartel's infrastructure. As night fell, the desert cooled, and the team prepared for the assault. Each checked weapons, reviewed plans, and steeled their nerves. Mateo's voice cut through the quiet. "This isn't just a fight for survival. It's a war for the soul of this town. We fight smart, strike hard, and never give them a moment's peace." Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. But inside El Mirador, a fierce resolve burned bright. The war in the desert had become a deadly chess match, with each move potentially deciding the lives of many. And Mateo Vargas was playing to win. The desert night was heavy with silence, a deceptive calm before the storm. Mateo Vargas and his team moved like ghosts through the rocky terrain, closing in on the cartel's logistics hub nestled near the abandoned mining town. Every footstep was calculated, every breath steady. This mission was more than a raid. It was the culmination of months of strategy, sacrifice, and silent warfare. Camila led the point team, her movements precise and silent. She disabled perimeter alarms with deft fingers, eyes scanning for any sign of early detection. Torres crept behind her, planting explosives on critical structural points, ammo depots, fuel storage, communications arrays. Each charge meticulously positioned to cripple the cartel's operations. Garza took his sniper's nest high above, his rifle trained on the approach routes. His steady gaze scanned the darkness for reinforcements or escapees, prepared to pick off any threat before they could react. Mateo's voice was calm and commanding in their earpieces. "Position set. Wait for my signal." The assault began with brutal efficiency. The team swept through corridors and storage rooms, neutralizing cartel guards before they could mount a defense. Suppressed shots echoed in the shadows. Tactical knives flashed briefly in close quarters, and flashbangs disoriented their enemies. Explosions tore through the facility as Torres detonated his charges, flames licking the night sky and sending thick plumes of smoke into the cool desert air. The hub's destruction would ripple through the cartel supply lines for weeks. But just as Mateo's team prepared to exfiltrate, the distant roar of engines shattered the night silence. Reinforcements, Diego Morales' elite enforcers, were incoming, faster and fiercer than expected. "Hold your positions," Mateo ordered firmly. "Engage on my mark." The final battle erupted in a deadly symphony of gunfire and chaos. Every corridor, every doorway became a kill zone. Mateo coordinated with ruthless precision, directing suppressive fire, coordinating flanking maneuvers, and deploying traps to thin the enemy ranks. Amid the chaos, Mateo faced a familiar, terrifying figure, the Butcher. Their eyes locked, a silent acknowledgement of their deadly rivalry. But this time, Mateo was ready. Using tactical deception and quick reflexes, he disarmed and subdued his longtime adversary, ending the Butcher's reign of terror once and for all. As dawn's light crept over the horizon, the cartel's logistics hub lay in ruins, its hold on the region broken. The team, battered but victorious, regrouped in the early morning glow. Mateo looked across his weary but resolute team. This is only the beginning. We've won a crucial battle, but the fight for peace, freedom, and justice is ongoing. Stay vigilant. Stay united. The town of El Mirador was no longer a place of fear. It had transformed into a symbol of resilience and hope. A community standing tall against oppression, armed with courage and the guidance of one man's unwavering resolve. Mateo Vargas, the underestimated plumber turned deadly ex-CIA operative, had rewritten the rules of engagement. His story was no longer a secret whispered in the shadows. It was a beacon of defiance. And in the Sonoran Desert, a new dawn was rising. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive tactical stories.